Most Catholics think that it is the Basilica of St. Peter's in Rome that is the Pope's main church, but they are mistaken. St. John Lateran is the Pope's church. It is, as I said at the beginning of Mass, the cathedral of the Diocese of Rome. And of course, the Bishop of Rome presides in his cathedral at St. John Lateran. So some history about what happened at the dedication of St. John Lateran. The name of the cathedral is derived from the Laterani family. It is on this site where the Laterani palace stood many, many years ago in the 3rd century. It is there that the first basilica was located. The land was donated by the Laterani family to the Emperor Constantine. And then Constantine then presented this palace to the church. Its annual celebration of its dedication throughout the Latin Church is a sign of unity and a sign of love with the papacy and with the city of Rome as the center of the Roman Catholic Church. It was around the year 320 AD, and this is accounted by St. Eusebius of Caesarea. It was then, that year, that the Emperor Constantine and his army were in battle against the Emperor Maxentius. It was during that time that his army witnessed a great event on the side of the Laterani hill. They saw in the sky a cross that appeared to them. And so then it was surmounted by the inscription on it, "In hoc vince," which means, "In this sign you will find conquest." So it was that the Emperor Constantine ordered that the cross of the Christians to be placed upon the Roman battle banners, on the Roman imperial standards. And of course, as history tells us, the very next day, he defeated Maxentius and his army on the Lateran Hill in Rome. It was then that, as a sign of gratitude to the God of the Christians, the emperor then granted them freedom of worship and gave permission to build the first basilica of the Roman Catholic Church as a votive offering that he made for the triumph and victory over Maxentius. So the original church building of St. John Lateran was most likely adapted from the hall of the Laterani Palace. It was dedicated to our Savior, Jesus Christ. And from its magnificence, it was known as the Basilica Aurea. Though several times it was destroyed and rebuilt, the basilica retained its ancient form, where it was divided by rows of columns into aisles and having an atrium with colonnades present. There was a simple restoration done in the 17th century that was not greatly appreciated, and where the appearance of it was somewhat changed. In that time, a monastery was then built between the basilica and the city walls, where the cloister still remains. The original apse of the basilica, which is the domed sanctuary, where the altar is located, survived until 1878. It was torn down, and a deeper and more present one was built in its place. The mosaics found in the basilica, ancient mosaics, have been preserved. The high altar, made of wood, have been preserved as well, and is now encased in marble, the centerpiece, the center place of the Basilica of St. John Lateran. The upper part of the baldacchino, or the canopy above the altar, are the reliquaries of the heads of the apostles Peter and Paul. The baptistry in the back of the basilica is an octagonal edifice which has porphyry columns. Porphyry is one of the hardest and rarest kinds of grain found on the earth. They remain today. The font is of green basalt, an unusual green basalt, which is, of course, volcanic rock. This basilica has been the Cathedral of Rome since the church's founding in the 4th century. That structure and its successors have suffered fire and earthquake and the ravages of war, but the Lateran remained the church where popes are consecrated until the popes returned from Avignon in the 14th century. Pope Innocent X then commissioned the present structure to be built in 1646. It is one of Rome's most imposing churches. The Lateran's towering facade is crowned with 15 colossal statues, more than life-size. The statues include the statues of Christ, St. John the Baptist, St. John the Evangelist, and 12 of the early church fathers and doctors of the church. In its high altar remains a small wooden table. Tradition holds that this wooden table was used by St. Peter himself to celebrate Mass on. So if you go to the Basilica of St. John Lateran and have a chance to visit the Baldacchino, it is good to stop and reflect upon the fact that the altar there is one of the first altars which celebrate the Eucharist, altar celebrated by St. Peter himself. Certainly one of the great treasures of our church. If you ever have a chance to get to Rome, your trip should include a visit to St. John Lateran Basilica, the ancient basilica and the home cathedral of the Pope.